الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Let the Quran Speak. My name is Sophia, I'm your host. Since the advent of the Arab Spring, we've heard a lot about the lives of dictators. We've also heard about their wives. Most recently, we've heard about the wife of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Her name is Asma, and she's stood by her husband in the midst of violence against Syrian citizens. What can individuals do to support their spouses and also correct their spouses when they are doing wrong, particularly when situations involve power and money? We'll be looking at that a little later in the show. Now, also, when we think about domestic violence or domestic abuse, we often think about it in the context of non-Western countries or less civilized countries. However, a recent survey shows that in Alberta, nearly 1 in 10 men believe domestic violence is acceptable. How do these attitudes persist in a country like Canada? We'll be looking at that also later in the show. Then we take a look at some work that we've done at MIST Toronto. MIST stands for the Muslim Interscholastic Tournament. It's a tournament that takes place in Toronto with about 800 participants from high schools, and they compete in tournaments involving, or competitions involving debating, speaking, athletics, arts, and many other different categories. We'll be showing that a little bit later in the show, and we end with a question and answer period. With me is Brother Shabir Ali from the Islamic Information Center. Brother Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on this packed show.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. But let's begin by talking about the wives of dictators and what they can do. We've heard a lot in the past about different dictators. I mean, I mentioned Asma, Bashar al-Assad's wife, but we've also heard about Suzanne Mubarak, for example, and many others who have supported their husbands, perhaps even helped their husbands to amass wealth and power.
Yes.
What can we say about this situation?
Well, it is an appalling situation. We know the very simple principle that we should not steal, nor should we benefit from the avails of whether it be stealing or any other illegal or immoral activity. If there is a leader oppressing his people and as a result of this amassing wealth for himself, then often he shares that wealth with his family members. He appoints members of his family to important positions. And sometimes that wealth that he is draining from the hard work of his citizens are actually channeled towards his larger family circles, and sometimes a whole tribe. So everyone, whether it be the spouses of these dictators or their family members or tribal members of their tribe, should really resist and say, I want nothing of this. I'm not a dictator myself, I don't harm people, and I cannot benefit from any of the avails of such immoral behavior.
Do you think that if one benefits from such wealth or power, one is accountable to God for this?
Yes, of course. Sometimes it is difficult to draw the line between what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in terms of benefiting from the harm that somebody else is doing. Somebody from a Muslim perspective, you might have somebody being involved in what is referred to as a haram means of earning, an illegal means of earning, something that's contrary to our religious principles. Let's say somebody is selling alcohol as a result of which he earns money, and now he invites you to a dinner. Now, there's a dilemma. Do I accept the dinner or not? But on the one hand, you might say, I can't accept the dinner because this is coming from an illegal sort of earning. On the other hand, you might say, okay, let me accept the dinner so that I can at least have a chance to sit with him and chat with him and maybe persuade him to change his lifestyle and pick up means of earning which is lawful and morally suitable for a Muslim. So there's a dilemma there. But in some cases, the line is clearly crossed. In some of the reports that have leaked to the Guardian newspaper in the United Kingdom, it is mentioned that some of these spouses of the famous dictators, now infamous, for example, the wife of the Libyan Muammar Gaddafi, and now Bashar al-Assad's
yes.
wife, and we also heard about Mohammed Zain al-Abidin, that his wife also have amassed great amounts of wealth. They live in great luxury, spending thousands of dollars for very insignificant pieces of decoration, whether it be for their clothing or things around the house. And at the same time, they're spending this and living in this kind of luxury while their people are suffering from the iron fist of their husbands. So obviously the lines have been crossed, and people are responsible for what they do. Yes, they will be held accountable by God.
Now, we know that these individuals that we've mentioned were not particularly religious or concerned about Islam or their faith. But just speaking more generally, what can an individual do in that circumstance where their husband or their, maybe their wife is doing something that seems very wrong? Should they speak out? What should they do as a response?
Definitely they should speak out, and this it transcends religion. It doesn't require religion to say to you that something is wrong. We all have the inbuilt human consciousness, which is a gift from God. That's inner guidance that separates between right and wrong. Everybody has this. We can sense that certain things are wrong. Maybe in some individuals it's more acute than in others, but we all have that sense. And as much as we want to stay away from what is wrong, we want our close and dear ones to also stay away from what is wrong, and we can at least advise them, especially when it comes to our spouses. One of the objectives of marriage is to find a person to live with who can be of benefit to you and you of benefit to that person. And one of the chief ways in which we can be of benefit to each other is by offering advice. The Quran says that the relationship between the two spouses is like the relationship of a person with his or her garment. The garment protects a person and also makes the person look good. In a hadith it is said that dinun nasiha, the religion is about advice, and naturally we should advise our spouses and help them to do what is right.
Now, you mentioned that every individual has a sense of right and wrong, but that sense can get eroded over time if one continues to do or to participate in wrong. And
True.
And if one, let's say one lives with a spouse who is continuously doing wrong, and one cannot correct that in some way, then perhaps one can get swept into that action by oneself.
Yes, and we have to watch for the signs and see the trends. You see,
So
at
how
first,
does one avoid getting swept in?
Yeah, okay. So first, to notice the signs, to see that that this is actually happening. At first, a person will resist something and say, no, it cannot be done. At the next level, a person will start tolerating it because he resisted it for so long, and now there's no sense resisting. Now it's futile, so you just tolerate it. But then the third step is that you now start to benefit from it. So when it shifts from the lack of resistance to tolerance, you can see this as a first step in degradation. And then if it shifts further into a situation where you're actually benefiting from that, from the wrongs of the other person, whether it be your spouse or someone else, that's when you really should wake up and smell the coffee and realize that things have gone too far now and go back to the first step. It's really time to resist again. The other thing that could, you asked, how does one prevent oneself from falling into this, is by recognizing the principle that is taught in our religion that we cannot support wrong even when it is done by our own. In the Quran, in Surah 4, verse 129, it says that you are to stand up for justice, even when it be against your own family members or even yourself. Like, you shouldn't be defending yourself by committing injustice. If you've done wrong, just admit it, get over with it, and make reparations. A hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that you should stop the oppressor Rather, it's put in a different way. It says you should help your brother, whether he is being oppressed or whether he is the oppressor. So his companions were puzzled by this. They said, well, okay, we know that you're supposed to help your brother if he's being oppressed, but how can you help your brother if he is the oppressor?
So
and
they
he
asked
said,
the prophet this.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the prophet, peace be upon him, said, you help your brother if he's the oppressor by stopping him from committing oppression. So, you know, take that saying and translate, read spouse instead of brother now. So stop your spouse from committing oppression or whatever evil it is. Of course, we can only do so much. We can only advise, and then it's up to the other person whether that person will listen or not. But we must continually advise so that the other person gets the message and does what is right.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Shibir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we look at a survey on domestic violence in Alberta.